Welcome to the Demeere podcast. We talk about martial arts, self-defense, and a whole lot more. And now your host, Demeere.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Now, this is episode 44, and in this one, I am going to take a look back to last year, 2019, and look forward to everything that I will have coming up this year. But as always, a quick shout out to one of my patrons, and that's, I'm assuming it's Peter, but he goes by Portabella. So, don't know which one I'll use. I'll use Portabella because that's what you use. So, it's a fun nickname. I like it, but I want to thank you for your support because you've been one of my patrons for a little bit over a year, if I'm not mistaken. And I always say it, and people say, like, why do you always say it like that? Well, because it's true. It's thanks to your support and that of everybody else that I can bring the podcast, do my blog, and all the lots of stuff that I've been doing for the last almost, well, we're going into our fourth year on Patreon now, and the podcast has been going for a few years as well. So again, thanks to your support, Portabella, that's why I'm here. So thank you very much, and everybody else, if you want to join me, go to patreon.com/Wim Demeere, my name. Link is in the show notes as always. So just show up there, see if you like the content there, and that would be an excellent way of supporting the podcast, but also give you access to obviously the whole content library that we have there. And it's getting really, really big. I'm going to do another blog post with an update of, it's been I think 5 or 6 months since I did another update on my blog about what I did on Patreon. So it's high time for that, one of those. But I'll talk about that another time. So let's get started with today's episode, in which, like I said, I'm going to look back and look forward. Now, first things first, it's been a while since the last episode. That was late November, and I kind of needed to take a break because life was getting crazy hectic for a bunch of reasons. Most importantly, it was the book launch, my Boxing for Self-Defense book. That was, as some of you know, it was horrible to get it out, and eventually it worked out better than I could have expected, given all the problems. Again, all on my side when it comes to dealing with Amazon and publishing it. It's nothing on the side of the book itself. It was just technical stuff. But that basically got in the way of doing other things, and it just left me pretty much wasted and exhausted. And I needed a break from doing a lot of the stuff that I was doing. So took a little bit break from podcasting, and well, now I'm back. So I want to go over a little bit of last year, a couple of things that stood out to me personally. And the first thing I want to mention is, well, I took a look at the stats of the podcast, and it's been growing steadily month over month. So that's thanks to you, the listener. I want to, again, thank you also, especially because it's thanks to the listeners, and especially when you share the episodes or you leave a review on iTunes, or you like something and you comment on it on my blog and so on. That's what helps spread the message of the podcast. So that's I'm always flabbergasted and amazed when I see the number of people who like the stuff that I do. So it's let me put it differently. Podcasting is quite a lonely endeavor. So it's just me sitting in front of the mic and talking into it and doing all the prep work, all the processing of the audio files and so on. So it's really heartwarming sometimes to see some of the responses that I get. So for that, thank you, dear listener. And I hope you will enjoy everything else that is to come as far as the podcast goes. Now, looking back to last year, well, I saw that there were 3 episodes that stood out that got the most hits or downloads, however you want to call it. And strangely enough, they were all podcast episodes that were in quick succession. So the number 1 podcast of last year was episode 30, and that was the interview I did with Dr. Alexis Archibald. Now, if you haven't listened to it, go to wimsblog.com/3030, so number 30. Again, all the links will be in the show notes, but it's a really interesting podcast because Dr. Archibald has been at the forefront of helping, in particular, law enforcement officers dealing with deadly force encounters. And she co-wrote the book with Lauren Christensen many years ago, and they very recently, if I'm not mistaken, it was last month, they brought out kind of an updated version of that one. And she very generously shared all her experience with you, the listener, and it's well worth listening to. If you haven't already, very much recommend you do so. So that's episode 30. And I can also already share this with you. She has agreed to come on the podcast again. I mailed with her a little while ago, and I have to finish reading the book first. And then we will do another interview talking about this updated version of the book she wrote together with Lauren. And again, it's about deadly force encounters, where when as a police officer you use lethal force, what happens, how do you deal with it, and so on. But I believe, and from what I've read already, it's a book that is just as valuable even if you're just a civilian and you're not into law enforcement or the military. It's going to be really effective in helping you prepare for such an encounter should this ever happen to you, and dealing with the aftermath. So that's something I look forward to doing that interview and talking to Alexis, because she's a really interesting person and obviously extremely skilled and experienced in her field. So I always love talking to experts. So that was the number 1 episode last year. And then we got number 2, and that was episode 32, which is self-defense tips for young women. So that was one that I created. I mentioned that at the end of summer, late August last year, I did a self-defense course for young women, so teenage girls, late teens. And it was basically got started when there was this very horrible murder here in Belgium, and I think it was April or May of last year. I'm not sure anymore. That kind of shocked the country. That this young girl she tragically lost her life, and a lot of people were outraged. And one parent got involved, and he took action, and he contacted me to see if there was something that I could do as far as helping their children and the children of his friends, obviously, do something to defend themselves. And it primarily focused on young women. So I kind of condensed some of the things that I gave during that seminar into that podcast episode. So if you have a young daughter, teenager, early 20s, and so on, that might be something that you might want to share with them. It's just practical stuff from my perspective, from my experience as a parent of 2 children. My daughter is also in her late teens, so kind of have some experience there. And that brings me to the 3rd most popular podcast from last year, and that was number 31. So we've got 30, 32, and then now 31, which is very strange that they're all in sequence like that. But the stats are what they are. I checked on Libsyn what the statistics of downloads said, and that's what it gave me. Now, episode 31, that one is titled The 3 Most Common Mistakes Students Make. I'm not going to say them here. Listen to the podcast, 31, and then you'll hear me talk about that. And that's pretty much something... It's one of those questions that I often get, okay, what can I do better, or what kind of mistakes do students make, and so on, when I talk to other people and I explain what I do. So I decided to make a podcast out of this and just I could have given other common mistakes, but I tried to focus on the ones that I think are most important and that I encounter quite a lot when I'm teaching. I've been teaching for several decades now, so that is my experience as a teacher, and I wanted to share it with you guys in the hopes that you don't make the same mistakes, obviously, or if you are a teacher, that you can maybe spot that in your own students and try to help them avoid those. So that was it for the top 3 episodes of last year. It was, again, fun for me to make all those episodes. I enjoy the podcasting experience. When it all goes well, again, all the technical stuff sometimes it's a little bit tricky. But it's quite a bit of fun, and most of all, I enjoy the interviews, especially with, like I said, Dr. Arthwal, because she's an expert, and I just really love talking to people who are so much smarter than me, which, as some cynical voices might say, that's not all that difficult, Wim, and I might agree with them on that. Now, moving on to the next highlight of last year. It's kind of a mixed bag, like I already hinted at, and that would be the release of my Boxing for Self-Defense book. Now, It was very difficult to write and finish it. It was very difficult to publish it, but surprisingly so, it did really, really well. It was on the number one spot for boxing on Amazon, so the category boxing. And also, I think martial arts, but for sure, I know for boxing, it was on the number one spot in the rankings for 2 weeks straight. So I want to thank everybody out there who bought it. You're awesome. And I very much appreciated that you all got out and found the book. And I've noticed now that I've got several people who were kind enough to leave a review on Amazon. That was really great as well. Again, I've got a bunch of 5-star reviews now. So if you haven't done so already, please take a minute to do so. That helps out the book tremendously. It has to do with the way that Amazon works. I'm not going to go into that too much, but leave a review if you can. If you enjoyed the book, just an honest review. That's fine. But just wanted to mention that it's always nerve-wracking to get a book out, but it's extremely like I said before, heartwarming to see when people enjoy it and that it's just doing so well. So obviously the big push from launching the book is over now, but it keeps selling quite well. So I'm very happy with that. And it's just something that kind of reinvigorates me to write some more after. I've said it before, but what typically happens after I finish a book and I publish it is that I just can't stand it anymore. And the boxing book itself, I think I've only, picked it up and opened it a few times since it got published. Because usually I just put them on the shelf and can't look at it for at least a year. So that's kind of the way my process works, to put it like that. And it's great to get the validation of the audience that it's not for nothing. That if I hate the book for about a year, that other people kind of like it. So that's great. And speaking of the book, I've got a surprise coming up. I'll talk about that in a little bit when I mention the things that are coming up for this year. But one of the things I did already, I did it on Patreon, but I'll do a few more on Patreon, and then we'll probably do a few more on my YouTube page, and that is doing video analysis, like I do my violence analysis videos on Patreon, and of people using boxing for either self-defense or in some sort of fight. I'll just grab the video and then use my software to slow it down, speed it up, draw, focus, zoom in on certain aspects, and draw arrows and so on, like you guys have seen me do. There's already one on Patreon, and I want to do a bunch more because it tends to illustrate very well some of the things that I write in the book. And I always like that kind of stuff, is that when you read something, that there's a video online or whatever that you can go look at, and that clearly demonstrates whatever technique or principle that is in the book, and vice versa, when there's a video that you can find something to read about, which sometimes it's easier to write something to go into detail as opposed to have this monologue of 5 or 10 minutes straight. And sometimes it's easier to show something instead of write about it. So I kind of like this interaction between both formats, both video and written word. So that's why I wanted to do a little bit more for the boxing book, and that will be those fight analysis videos that will be coming up over the coming weeks. I don't have a fixed schedule, but it's just one of those things that I'll do along the way. So that was for the boxing book. And again, if you haven't got it already, I'll put some links in the show notes. Go to wimsblog.com/44, number 44, and I'll put a link to the book and the Patreon video where I already did that analysis of the video. So that was it for the second highlight of last year, and then going over to the third, which kind of happened late last year, and some of you might actually have missed this, but I started a Facebook group on my Facebook page, a public one. I have a private one for my patrons, which is obviously only accessible by them, but I also opened a public book now, and it's kind of something that it had been on my mind for a while, but I've just been too busy with other stuff. And I am a member of several Facebook groups myself, mostly private ones. But I kind of noticed that it's a much more practical format to interact with people as opposed to commenting on somebody's Facebook page or their personal account. It's just more practical to have some interaction going. So it looks very similar to the old forums. If you're old like me, you know what forums are online. And the Facebook groups tend to follow a slightly similar format. So I kind of like it. And also because everybody's used to using Facebook to comment and talk and reply to stuff. So it's quite, I think the interface is quite well. So that's why I decided to try it. And most of all, because I noticed that on my own Facebook page, what happens is that if somebody wants to post something there, either you have to send me a private message and then nobody else can see it. And if you want to post it so that everybody else can see it, the way you do that, Facebook tends to hide it. You really everybody else has to go looking for whatever you posted, unless you post a reply to something that I wrote. But then you can't initiate a conversation, which is obviously the goal of a page, because the page is mine. So I'm supposed to post stuff. But the group is different. In the group, anybody can comment and post stuff, which is a totally different dynamic. So I wanted to give that a try. And late last year, I think it was late December, I I put a quick poll up on my Facebook page. I said, look, if I open a group, would you be interested or not? And about 100 people said yes. Nobody said no, which is a good sign. So I opened the page, and then by now I think we've got about 150 plus people who are in the group. And I'm really happy with the way the dynamic is going. It's just we haven't had any trolls, and I'll explain why later. Discussion has been civil, and everybody's just sharing some information and talking. And I really like the dynamic that we've got right now, and I just want to make sure that I keep it that way so that we get to the goals of that group. And it's very simple. It's just trying to create a place where we've got a community of like-minded people, and we talk about self-defense and martial arts and so on. And the goal is that everybody learns, makes progress, and just we try to get along, and everybody is trying to be positive. So that positive in the sense that it's not about proving somebody wrong. It's not about proving how awesome you are. It's about sharing your experience, your perspective, and then we discuss about different topics, and then hopefully you can learn something. Obviously, you can ask questions, and we can go answer them. And it's been really fun getting to know some of you a little bit better when you talk about where you come from, what your background is, and so on, and seeing some of the responses that we've got to several of the discussions that got started. It's been a lot of fun. So the link is very simple, and you go to facebook.com/groups/ You Are Not Ares. Ares, the god of war. You are not Ares. No, again, I'll put a link in the show notes. And you can also get there if you go to my Facebook page. You look on the left-hand side at the menu, and there's going to be a link that you click on that is set groups, and then you'll find the link. And there's two things that kind of make our group a little bit different. First off, you do not just get access. You have to answer 2 questions. First one is did you read the rules? And the second one is, do you agree to the rules? And that's not negotiable. If you don't answer, you don't get in. If you answer no, you don't get in. That's it. No negotiations, no ifs, ands, or buts. That's it. The rules are there to be followed. Now, why do I do it that way? Well, I've explained this before, but I've been on Mark McYoung's Animal List for a long time. I think about almost 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. And a really long time. And one of the things that made that list special is that there were rules, and they were very strict. And there was a moderator, Mrs. V, let's call it that. And for those of you who were on the Animal List, you know what I'm talking about. So there were very, very strict rules to how discussion needed to be approached, because it was all meant to be done in such a way so that it would remain constructive. Now, it's okay if you have a heated discussion. It's okay if you have a very intense discussion, but there need to be certain standards. And especially in this day and age where everybody gets outraged over everything, and politics have gone really nuts. And not just, I'm talking English, so not just in the US or the UK, but trust me, Belgium is totally messed up. We still don't have a government. It looked like we're going to have some more elections still, and it's just a big mess, and everybody's outraged and angry. Well, that kind of discussion doesn't really help anybody if you're just shouting at each other. And I'm getting too old for that kind of stuff. So I wanted to have rules. And you answer the questions, you read the rules, you accept them, and then you get in. And I'll give you a quick rundown. So again, the reason for the rules is that the animal list was the only place that I knew where there was discussions the place kept going for as long as it's been going because there were rules. I've seen so many forums go get busted up because people were starting flame wars. If you're old enough, you know what that is. And just it was a horrible free-for-all where everybody was trying to stab each other in the back, verbally speaking, of course. And those places, they came and went because there were no rules, and people were being assholes, let's call it that. I want my place to be different, and that's why it's important that we're all on the same page when it comes to, okay, how do we behave? Now, obviously, there needs to be a moderator, and that is me and my alter ego. And my alter ego is Crom. If you read the old Conan novel, the old Conan comic books, where I first learned of Crom, and you saw the old Schwarzenegger movie, you know who Crom is. He's an angry god. He's a grumpy god, so you do not want to get his attention. And Crom will take action if you break the rules. So, what are the rules? Well, as the name of the group says, it's you are not Ares, god of war. So you don't know everything about violence, and nobody does. So if you come with an open mind to the group, it's going to be awesome. If you come from a place like, well, this is how violence works and I know everything, then I am going to ask Crom to step down from his mighty throne and smite you. Because nobody does. Not me, not you, nobody knows everything about violence. It's just too big a subject for anybody to own it. And then we get the second rule, and that's don't be a dick. Now, again, there goes the safe rating for this episode. But I just loathe people who go online and they just rip into others and they're there to show off, and they come from this place where they seem to think that they know everything. They demean others. They write these huge paragraphs after paragraphs of comments, which is just like half a novel, them spouting their opinions. Or they get passive aggressive, or they get outraged and they insult people and all that kind of stuff. That is just the worst side of the internet. I loathe that. I'm too old for that. So I literally say in the rules, if you can't be civil, shut up and walk away. And that's as easy as it goes. So that keeps the conversation floating. If you can't be civil, just stop talking. And that's fine. Nobody can fault you for saying, like, you know what, I'm just going to walk away from this discussion because I'm going to get angry. That's perfectly fine. It's called being an adult. That brings us to the next rule. So that is discussing good faith or shut up. Now, discussing in good faith is that you don't try gotcha questions. You don't try to prove that the other person is wrong. You don't start from a position that you cannot be wrong. It absolutely needs to be the other person who is wrong. That is not discussing in good faith. That is just picking a fight. So the whole point is that, and I learned this from a good friend of mine when we started discussing things years ago, and it got very heated. And then he said that, and that always stuck with me. He says, the value of the discussion lies in the exchange, not in winning, not in proving the other guy wrong, but it's the exchange. It's that you get to reevaluate your own position because it gets challenged by the other person. So you have to think things through. Now, if you are not willing to do that, if you're only discussing things where you don't even listen to the other person's arguments, you just wait for your turn to speak again, that's not a discussion. That's not good faith. So I don't want those people in the group. If that's how you discuss, I mean, you can do that all over the internet, but not in my group. And the next rule is you accept to agree to disagree. This happens a lot when you discuss, especially if you've discussed for a while. That is getting very in-depth and detailed. it can be that all of a sudden, you both notice, or you notice that, you know what, we don't have anything left to say. We've covered everything. We've both, clearly pointed out our positions and tried to argue them, and we're not getting any further. Okay, let's shake hands, virtually speaking, and move on. And again, that's what adults do. That's like, okay, thank you for your time. It was interesting. Now, let's move on to something else. Next rule, he who asserts must prove. This was a big one on the animal list. And I think that is one of the challenges for this year and probably the coming years for everybody, regardless of whatever you say or think, is that if you make a claim, you have to be the one proving it, not the other person. It's you. That means you have to cite sources. Where did it come from? That means you have to pull up quotes. You have to pull up scientific research, point to books and other sources, and so on. And for the record, Wikipedia is not a source that I accept. Not anybody can write an entry on Wikipedia, and a lot of people do. Wikipedia has its value, but not as a source for the discussions that I use. And that changes the dynamic a lot if you are asked, and that is one of the corollaries to this rule, is that he who asserts must prove, but it also means that somebody can call you out. And there's different ways of doing that, but what I basically like is that if there's a discussion and I say, 99.999% of all fights end up on the ground, then it is very much your right in the discussion to say, you know what, Wim, I'm calling you out. Can you please prove that? Or give me some citations, sorry. And then I have to back up what I say. And that is a dynamic that I noticed on the animal list, is that helped just everybody think a lot more about what you say. And it raised the level of the discussion. And if we can keep that going in my group, that I think that's going to be awesome, because I've seen the effects on it of this rule on myself. I was very opinionated when I was younger. I still am, but I've learned to shut up more. I've also learned to understand the limits of my my experience and the things that I know something about, things that I have a little bit of an idea about, and there's a huge amount of topics that I know next to nothing about. So I've learned to be a little bit more quiet about things that I'm not really all that knowledgeable about, because there are people out there who know a whole lot more. So I am not going to just spout my mouth off with, a bunch of nonsense that everybody is going to roll their eyes and say like, oh, that guy he doesn't know what he's talking about. And this kind of goes against what we, in my opinion, have nowadays a lot. Is just the need for everybody to have an opinion on something. No, it's perfectly fine to say, you know what, I don't have an opinion on that. And it's one of the things that my friend Barry Eisler taught me. He said, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I haven't thought this through. First, I'm going to think about this and look up some information, and then I am going to form an opinion, and I'll get back to you on that. When somebody asks you for an opinion and they press you, you have no obligation to oblige. You don't have to give your opinion on something if you're not confident or you don't really know. I mean, you can push that aside and just say to the person, you know what, I don't know, as opposed to just saying nonsense and then afterwards just slapping yourself in the forehead and say like, "Doh," like Homer, and regretting whatever you said. So that's another rule. Another one is no ads, because that brings out the trolls and people who want to spam the board. So no spam, no politics, no religion, no ideology. I don't care what it is. Religion, zero. I don't want to hear about it. Politics, nope. Ideology, same thing. It doesn't matter how important it is to you. I do not want it in my group, just like I don't want it on my Facebook page. Why? Because I've never seen anything good come of discussing these online, especially between people who don't know each other. I've seen friendships explode, especially over the last year, especially over politics, the last 2 years, sorry. Friendships, just from decades-old friendships, explode over online discussions about politics. So I don't want it, because it's useless. Do it in person. That's the only way I think it can still work. Then another rule, again, I'm going over these rules quickly so that if you come over that you kind of know what kind of place you can expect. So next one, you can ask questions, but first thing you have to do is Google it for at least 15 minutes. So instead of just assuming that everybody is there to be your little slave and look up stuff for you, no. First, do a good faith effort to look things up. And if you can't find it, then you can ask. Or you look it up, you find something and it's not clear. Okay. Well, then you ask, look, I looked this up. It doesn't make sense to me. Does anybody know? So that we can skip this whole part where everybody just has to jump when ask you how high when you say jump. And that's not how a community works. Then I've got 2 more rules. First one, the next to last one is humor. It's a double-edged sword, as I explain it. It's one of the best ways that I've seen people just mess things up when they are new to a group, trying to be funny. Every group has a dynamic. Dynamics in groups change. You don't know anybody there. And the main thing that you're doing if you try for humor as a first is, in most cases, you make a fool of yourself because you have no idea what the group will find funny. So be a little bit more reserved. Do a sober intro if you want to do one, and just give it some time to get to know everybody in the group before you start making jokes and cracking jokes. Because there are friends that can call me asshole and say stuff like that to me. But if I don't know you and that's your opening line, I'm very likely to either block you or say like there's something seriously wrong with this guy that he doesn't even understand as an adult, that is not a good way to introduce yourself. So that's it about humor. And then final one, copyright. Obviously, anybody writes something, it's their words, they own them. So you don't get to just copy and paste them elsewhere or use them elsewhere without permission. You also do not get to take screenshots and just post them elsewhere. If you're not, again, acting in good faith, if you can do that, you're welcome. If not, get out of there. So that's it about rules. A little bit longer than I wanted it to be, but I want to invite you all to come in to the group and enjoy everything that's there. I hope the group can grow and that we can attract even more people. So we get a really nice place for a community of like I said, like-minded individuals to hang out and discuss things. And that, again, rising tide, it raises all boats. So it's the same thing here, help each other out, but we all have to be on the same page. So that was the whole sequence about everything that I did last year, which is quite a bit. Now, what's going on for this year? Well, I am looking forward to doing more interviews. I've got a bunch of guests on my list, but I'm always open to suggestions. So you have suggestions, just leave me a comment on my blog or on my Facebook page, whatever, and let me know there, and I'll see what I can do. Again, no, I cannot give guarantees that it doesn't work that way. Sometimes I contact people and it just doesn't work out. It's fine, but I'm always looking for good guests, especially guests that might not have had the same exposure as others have had. I really enjoy it when somebody puts me in contact with an expert or an instructor or whatever that I personally didn't know, and it turns out that this person is really interesting, has an interesting background, lots of experience that I can learn something from, and then hopefully by sharing that with you, you can derive value of it too. So open to suggestions, go for it. And then the next thing, what is coming up? Well, I am going to try to shoot for a lot of writing and making a new instructional video for this year. So I've got my schedule that I'm trying to stick to. It's going to be pretty interesting because I'm quite busy outside of all the stuff that I do online, just professionally speaking. I have a full-time job, so it's quite hectic, but I try to rearrange things in my life a little bit so that I can write more. So what's going on? Well, first things first, I'm going to do a bonus little booklet, e-version, for the Boxing for Self-Defense book. And that's pretty much going to be some of the stuff that I cut out of the boxing book because it didn't fit, or there were some issues with it that I am going to use in that bonus little book. Another thing that's going to be in there is a bunch of the pictures that I took. I took over 400, if I'm not mistaken, and I only used, I think, about 130. So a bunch of pictures that I took that could be very useful or to, for illustrating certain things, but just as like a fun thing for you guys to watch. And I'll give some comments on some of the promotional pictures that I took to explain what the reasoning behind that shot was. Every single picture that I took was there for a reason, and there was rationale behind it. So that is something that I will explain in that bonus book. That one's going to be, for now, only available to patrons. So if all goes well, it will be either at the end of this month, January, or early next month in February when I can release that one. And it's very simple. If you're a patron, you can get it. If you're not a patron, you can't. Maybe one day I'll put it online, but I don't think so. So that is the first thing coming up. If you've got the boxing book, you might enjoy this. And it's just a little thing that I want to do. I took the pictures. I wrote the text before already. It just didn't fit for the book. So instead of throwing it away, I'm just going to use it as something, as a bonus for supporting my work on Patreon. So that's what I'm working on right now. What's coming next? Well, once that is done, I will continue writing the Self-Defense Tips for Men book. Now, many years ago, I wrote a blog post with that title, and to this day, that is one of the most visited posts every single month. So it goes viral every few weeks, and then there's a bunch of people who share it, and it seems to, resonate with people in a certain way. I don't know why. I've written hundreds of posts, and some of them just really seem to connect with people. It's great. And I've been writing a very much expanded version of those tips for a while now, several years ago. For a bunch of reasons, I abandoned it and focused on other work, but now I am going to work on that again, and that's going to be my next book that will be released. So Self-Defense Tips for Men. Why for men? Well, certain things are specific to the male of the species, and for women it's different. So that is something that I want to do. If all goes well, I'll eventually write a book, Self-Defense Tips for Women. But right now I'm working on a self-defense books for men. Why? Well, because of that blog post, because it gets so much, people seem to like it. So there seems to be an interest in this kind of material, right? So what I have done, and I think I'm about halfway through already, a little bit more actually with the book, is for each one of those rules, and there are 11 rules if I'm not mistaken, 11 tips, let's call it that. Just expand upon them, give more information about why I wrote that. And then also there are 2 parts to every chapter for each tip. And the first part is explaining it, why, what that means, giving the context. And the second part is kind of giving you not just homework, but also practical information on how to apply that tip in your daily life. So it's going to be a book in which that the goal is that you use it actively, not just read it once and then put it aside, but it's something that you can go back to and just work on routinely to help yourself stay safe. Now, there will not be a single physical technique in the book. I've written a bunch of books about physical techniques. I've made loads and loads of videos, instructional videos about specific fighting techniques. I've got another one coming up, which I will talk about in a second. So I've got lots of that. I've never written a book in which I detail how to keep yourself safe when it's not about the physical part. It's about everything that happens before that or outside of that area of training. So that's what I'm going to work on next. And if all goes well, that's going to take about 5 to 6 months, hopefully. Hopefully. Well, maybe a little bit less. It depends. I mean, I was hoping for finishing that one in April, if all goes well. And then depending, I've got some buffer zone, but depending on how production goes and so on, might be sooner. But we'll see. I made a schedule and I've revised it a little bit in the meantime, and we'll see how it goes. But that is one that I think is a book that you'll find very useful. there's a lot of just common sense stuff. But then what I try to do, with all my books, I try to put a lot of context and material and information in there, so that even if, there's a lot of stuff you've already heard, that there's some different ways of looking at it, or some additional information that you might not have considered or you might have forgotten, and that then helps you out. Where at the same time, the book is also accessible to beginners, people who just start with their training, who haven't heard that kind of information. So I always try to write in a way that there's something for everybody. Now that's the self-defense book. And then once that one is done, I will start on Boxing for Self-Defense 2. Applause, drum roll, whatever. The whole thing is that I set the Boxing for Self-Defense books up eventually when I figured out that it was just too much to write in one book. For a series, it's going to be 3 books, and the first one is out. That is just giving you the basics, gives you a foundation, and I say that specifically repeatedly throughout the book to make sure that everybody understands it, that the first book gives you the foundation that you need to start your training with boxing as a self-defense system. And then in the second book, we're going to layer a bunch of information and techniques on top of that foundation, so that you can add it to those foundational techniques and concepts. And the main focus of that second book is going to be dirty boxing, which is what it's called nowadays. And that is all the techniques that are not allowed in sports boxing. If you can't do it in the ring, well, that's going to be something that I'll be writing about. So all the dirty tricks, all the forbidden techniques and so on, and a bunch more. That is the focus of that second volume in the series. And it's going to be, again, a picture-driven book, so technique-driven, lots of techniques. I've got a bunch of stuff already written. I've got a pretty good outline already. It's not finished, but it's pretty good already. It's pretty good shape. And that's going to be very intense for me to write again, because as always, technical books, they take a long time to write, because you have to go over everything so many times. I cannot tell you how many times that I've written a description of a technique, and then I've written and rewritten it a bunch of times, and then I finished that chapter and then keep on writing, and eventually when I finish the book, I start reading everything from scratch. And I cannot tell you how many times that I've made some silly writing mistake where it's supposed to be left hand and I've written right hand, that I just mixed up the order. Because the way I write it in my head, I visualize a technique, and then sometimes I have to visualize what is the other guy doing, and then I have to keep both these images in my head. So I have to switch from one perspective to the other perspective, and that's when sometimes it just gets messed up. So that's one of the reasons why these kind of books take so long, because you really have to make sure that you don't make those kinds of mistakes. Because otherwise the reader is going to say, like, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, left hand, the left hand is nowhere near where he says it is. And then people hate the book. So that's the next big project. The self-defense tips book is going to be much easier to write because there's not going to be any techniques in there. But the boxing book, that's going to be, pretty intense. But I think at the end of it, it'll be worth it. Moving on to the next project, and that's for the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter of this year. And that is going to be Basic Self-Defense Volume 2. So if you bought my Basic Self-Defense video, that is what I teach beginners who tell me, like, I don't want to do anything with martial arts. I just want to learn to defend myself as quickly as possible. It's a system I've been teaching for about 20 years now. It's changed very much since I first helped another instructor develop it. And it's in several parts. There's several modules, so to speak. And the first one is the one that is available now, and that is controlling techniques. And the second one is going to be more along the lines of what we used to call neutralizing techniques. It's not about control, it's about putting a guy down and out. It needs to be over as quickly as possible. So it's a system I like a lot because it's very versatile. It fits into pretty much any system or martial art that you already practice. But it's the way it is taught that makes the difference. It's not about the techniques. It's about the way that the curriculum is structured. It's about the way that you practice, the way that you learn it in what comes first, what comes next, and so on. And then the way it is structured so that it is extremely versatile, so you can use it in pretty much any situation. And it's the best thing that I've managed to come up with if I'm not constrained by anything when regarding traditions or curriculums that are pre-existing and so on. This is kind of like the best effort that I can give right now. And I've had numerous people over the years who came back to me that they used it successfully. So that is Basic Self-Defense Volume 2, Neutralizing Techniques. That is going to be filmed late in the year. I'm hoping for October. And usually, if the video shoot goes well, doesn't take that long to do all the editing and so on. Just the video shoot, the prep work is what takes most time. Now, this is contingent on my health. I'm doing much better. I've done a lot of rehab last year, and it's been, I've been making progress, but there's some stuff bothering me. My knees are bothering me a little bit, so I will be going to the doctor in a few months to check my knees, and if he says it's fine, then I can keep going. If he says you're not fine, we'll see what he says. But that does not affect the writing. It does affect me making videos. So that's the only caveat that I have to give. Now, that's it. Okay, that's it. That's a pretty filled schedule for me. Obviously, in the meantime, Patreon goes on, all the content that I create every month there, my Facebook page and so on. The blog will keep going. I've got a bunch of articles that I'm going to put on my blog. Some of them are from the newsletter, from my Patreon newsletter. So some of them are original pieces that I haven't fully finished, but that I know that I will put on the blog, so that the blog gets a little bit more attention and love as well than that it got in the last year or so. So that's it. Now, before I go, if you want to be held up to date on all the stuff that is going to come out, you can sign up for my mailing list. It's very easy. You go to wimdemeere.com/notification. So not Wim's blog, but you go to wimdemeere, my name, .com/notification. Put in your email address, and then you're going to get a confirmation email with a link. You have to click that link, and only then are you on the list. It's a very low volume mailing list. When I have something new out, I'll let you know. When I have like a sale or something special that comes out, you get an email, and that's it. There's no high volume. It's not a newsletter. It's just like you don't want to keep checking if I've got something new out. You want me to let you know. That's it. I think when I published the boxing book last year, I think I sent maybe 2 mails out to everybody on the list. So that's it. So you can do that, and then you will know when I have something out. And that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you for listening to this really long podcast episode. We're closing in on almost 50 minutes. I wanted to take my time a little bit talking to you guys. I've got my script here, but I didn't really follow it all that much. I just want to talk to you guys a little bit more off the cuff, so to speak, so that we can reconnect a little bit and you guys know what's in store for you in the coming year 2020. In the meantime, thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to the show. And obviously, please share this with anybody you think might be interested. You want to support the show in a different way, you can go to my Patreon. Again, patreon.com/WimDemeere. You can subscribe on iTunes or wherever you're listening to. Join me on social media and all that stuff. And that's one of the best ways that you guys can help me out and make the show grow, which is kind of my goal. That's also one of the things I didn't really mention specifically, but this year I want to really make sure that the podcast keeps on growing, and that obviously that I can create more and more content for you guys and do even more interviews. All right, that's it. I'm signing off. Everybody have a great day, and I will talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Demeere podcast. For more information, go to www.wimsblog.com.